Before we dive into season 1, we're bringing you with a special prelude, season 0, Flirting with Design Technologies. It's a playful yet profound look at how technology is reshaping creativity, design, and innovation. Through a mix of fresh recordings, TEDx talks, and global design dialogues that we've had over the past years, we're revisiting key movements that define the evolution of digital design. From AI and parametric workflows to the future of education and fabrication, this season sets the stage for what's to come. Let's dive into Flirting with Design Technologies. Sound rolling, camera rolling, and action. Apart from the visual complexity, the complexity of the form, the geometry, the layering with different materiality that comes into a system. Because when we started doing facades, which is almost like 10 years back, nobody knew the term of parametric facade. Not many people knew the term parametric, and I think we were the sort of the first one to popularize the term through our education initiatives that we were doing. Gold can be something which has been possibly done before, but it's articulated in a different manner, which itself is pretty complex, in itself.
Procedure.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what we try to, break down, and that's how we create art as well. So I always like to say that the best of the value engineering is always invisible. You don't actually see it.
Hi everyone, I am Tanya Gulati, your host at the Breaking Complexity podcast, season 0, Flirting with Design Technologies, episode 5, The Art of Complexity, Parametric Art and Algorithmic Aesthetics. And I have with me the curator of the podcast, Mr. Sushant Verma.
Hi, this is Sushant Verma, the curator of the Breaking Complexity podcast, and I'm excited to be here in this episode where we talk about art and architecture and design and various other aspects involved in between. So excited to be here. Yeah.
So I have this question that has been popping in my head, and I would like to start with that only. What does complexity mean to you in context of art and architecture?
So complexity, obviously, when we talk of complexity in art and architecture, it's mostly the visual complexity that we like to talk about. And apart from the visual complexity, the complexity of the form, the geometry, the layering with different materiality that comes into a system. So I would say it's safe to say it's a systemic level complexity that exists in anything that we design. So any creative process has a set of complexity involved, and if you start to break it down into parts, you create like smaller fragments of simple steps or simple parts that kind of create the larger whole. And in the realm of art and architecture, it's pretty much the same for me, and that's the complexity we like to explore with.
Okay, so following up with that question, that answer only. So just like you said, you break the bigger whole, the bigger complexity into simple parts. Are they really simple or they are themselves complex?
Yeah, that's an interesting take, but yeah, the simple parts have to be further broken down into further simpler parts in smaller steps. And I think that's the essence of the kind of work that we've been doing, because visually, if you look at our work, specifically in the realm of art, for example, all the projects, all the installations that we work on have a sense of complexity involved. There is a certain design language which is distinct and unique in every single piece that we do. And if we start to break down the steps, there are different steps involved in the fabrication aspect of it. There are different steps involved in the design aspect of it. There are different steps involved in the finishing aspect of it, and then the different steps in detailing aspect of it. So everything is broken down into different segments, which itself is pretty complex, in itself.
Procedure.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what we try to, break down, and that's how we create art as well. We don't create art only basic on the basis of an intuition or something which we feel that we want to create. It is always like a project for us. Every installation has to sort of do a magic in the space where it's sort of inhabited, and that's where all the magic happens.
I mean, yeah, I've so far noticed, I've seen all your art labs projects. And I mean, every piece, every single piece has a very unique sort of concept. I mean, you won't find those things in a generic market which are possibly mass produced, I would say. So I don't find that kind of a thing in a market. If I like, for example, I saw your Instagram page and I thought, okay, this is something nice, and I go to the market looking for that particular thing, I wouldn't find it.
Right.
So I mean, in that sense, how do you get that idea ki, okay, this is unique and this is something nobody can do, maybe?
Yeah, so I think when we do an artwork, we're not thinking about that this has to be unique or it has to stand out.
Hmm.
The only thing that we think about is it has to be bold.
Yeah.
And bold does not mean that something that has not been done before. Bold can be something which has been possibly done before, but it's articulated in a different manner, or it is sort of comes out in a different form altogether. Maybe we would have explored a material in a different, unique way. Maybe we would have used a sense of color in a unique way, or sometimes the kind of patterns that we work with in a unique manner. And I think all of this sort of coming together adds up to boldness, which we try to bring it in
Right.
our artworks.
Right.
And all the artworks that we do have to sort of speak of bold. And yeah, you will not typically find something similar, because it ends up becoming something so complex and unique in itself that you can't sort of replicate that easily. In fact, that's something which we can talk about in detail later, perhaps, how we sort of detail out
Hmm.
the complex aspect so
Right.
it cannot be replicated. That is something
Right.
in art in itself, what we try to follow.
Yeah. I mean, so you're a very well-known architect. What? How did you get into art? I mean, what was the whole idea that you want to be a designer or you want to do these magnificent art pieces?
So, there are two reasons why we sort of ventured into art. One is architecture takes a lot of time.
Right.
Architecture is very time consuming. To get the output and the satisfaction that you get out of architecture, of course, it's incomparable. But as an architect, when you're designing something of a different scale, it takes time for the project to sort of get into reality after it gets into execution. And by the time the output actually comes out, you've actually transited into another state of being, because of which we never had the patience, honestly. I mean, architecture is great, but of course, venturing into art was something more personal, where I felt that the output could be churned out a little more quicker. And we could, second thing, reason was to be able to do experimentation.
Right.
Experimentation with fabrication, experimentation with detailing, experimentation with geometry. And when all of these three things come together, that's the essence of the artworks that we produce typically. And right from the beginning of our studio, the RatLab studio, which we started in India, after we moved back from venturing in London and US, uh, the whole idea was to do amazing architecture. But our one of the first projects that we sort of got commissioned was sort of an installation
Okay.
exhibition that we were doing. And that's where we saw the opportunity, because what we did was we prototyped a facade project that we were doing, which would have taken many years to actually build. And only in a few weeks, we created an art installation out of it. It was called Cellular Morphology Facade, CMF, as we like to call it. Uh, and that was the sort of the first built project. We put our team of people, who we had put together at the beginning of the studio. Everybody was sort of crafting art, and that's when we realized that we are so much interested in crafting art and creating those kind of complex patterns and understanding the engineering behind the art piece that we're kind of making. And that led to a series of projects and installations after that over the next couple of years, when we realized that hey, we're not just doing architecture, we're also doing art. So why don't we focus specifically on art itself as well? And that's where our journey of art started, and which started with something we initially, I remember, we started a project called Artex India, where we were
Okay.
collaborating with a lot of designers, fashion designers, musicians, hairstylists, to create an art in collaboration with them.
Okay.
And that later on became Art Lab for us. And Art Lab was sort of more of a formalizing and formulating a team and a brand, separating out of our studio, where we could only focus on interesting art pieces and art installations. And how the narrative of Art Lab also started was pretty much swapping the R and A of Rat Lab, which is how Art Lab was born and sort of branded like that, which gave it a meaning to us. It gave us a meaning to walk towards and create some interesting pieces and installations which we had been doing for many years, and that took different shapes and forms. So yes, one thing, architecture is long and boring at times. I love architecture, of course, but then there was an artist somewhere hidden which wanted to explore some things much more quicker. And second
Yeah.
thing was experimentation.
Right. So, as you said, experimentation and value engineering. So, I mean, what exactly is value engineering in art precisely?
So value engineering is where when we design a certain kind of a piece or an object, it could
Right.
be a furniture, it could be a wall art, it could be a chandelier. Everything requires a sort of a detailing.
Right.
This is not like a visual art that we're talking about. We're talking about three-dimensional art, which is more of a spatial art, which is there to solve a function. And the function is to actually uh, make the space more bold and transform it into a different narrative altogether. Where the art speaks, or even if it sort of speaks in silence, it sort of creates an impact. And when we're talking of so any installation that we are doing, it has to solve that certain function of being bold in a space. uh, the value engineering is basically detailing out every aspect of the art, which means understanding the joinery detail, understanding how it has to be fabricated, how it has to be sort of produced, uh, how it has to be painted or coated in a certain kind of a finish, how it has to be polished. Any process that is involved to create that product or an output, whether it's a wall art or a furniture or anything, there is a sense of detailing that is required. And that is what we call as the value engineering, because we have to optimize every single aspect, because most of the artworks that we are doing usually has thousands of elements, and unfortunately all of the elements are different and unique, and they have to be numbered, sequenced, put together in a certain manner. So the process of optimizing that, and the process of optimizing the fabrication, so the art can be produced in a quick span of time in a certain kind of a budget, that process is called value engineering. And the interesting part is at the end of end of the process, when the art is produced, you don't see the value engineering. So I always like to say that the best of the value engineering is always invisible. You don't actually see it. It's very much like how we see in a good German car, for example. You don't see the engineering, you see the beauty of the car and how it's sort of running and functioning, but you don't see the engineering that has gone behind it. And that is exactly what makes it function. And that stays the same in any art installation as well.
I mean, that's very insightful, I would say. And when we talk about materials in the value engineering, I mean, material also plays a very big role. Like, which exact material is to be used? Because there are a lot of material options in the market. So, how do you optimize on that? Like, making it cost effective as well as
Right.
functional and the perfect material that would be the right fit for that particular art piece.
Right. So when we are doing a project of an art installation, we typically have work with a mood board or a palette where
Yeah.
we sort of decide that what is the kind of look and feel of the space. I'll give you an example. We were doing this art installation where it was a chandelier which had to be put in a space which had this sense of luxury element in its in the overall space and the mood board, where one of the sofa has had a brass inlay. The flooring had a little bit of brass inlay as well, and so with some of the finishes of the furniture that we see around us. And that's when we thought, okay, we don't want to do a piece which is a chandelier, which is typical using of a glass and a light, bulbs being visible, etc. So we knew that we're going to be using brass as a material. So that sort of narrowed down our process. And then we looked into how it responds to the design problem that we were dealing with, which is how does it scatter the light, what is the kind of complexity that we want to bring in visually and geometrically. And then we started to incorporate that into the chandelier design basically. So the materiality comes as an afterthought of after understanding which space it will fit into. Another recent example is we were doing this bench, a large bench, which is called Serpentine Lounger, which is for an office space. And the mood board and the color palette and the material palette of the office space is using a birch ply. So we had to be specific about that the overall finish that we get has to be birch ply finish. So in that particular bench, we had these sections of timber, and we could not use an MDF, we could not use an HTHMR because it had to be PU coated. Even if it comes out nice, it will not match the birch ply finish. So we actually had to source birch ply wood boards, CNC cut them, and create the installation out of that, and a large 15 feet long lounger out of that, and that now matches with the overall palette of the space. So it is usually the space first. We have to understand the space. We have to understand what who the designer we are working with, what is their understanding and taste of the material, and accordingly we would choose the material. There are times where we've used stone. Uh, we've used granite, we've used marble, we've used solid surfaces, which is not technically a stone, but it'll give you a stone kind of a finish. But based on the palette of the space, we would rather create the art. So instead of art, being a part of the space, we try to go the other way around.
I mean, that's just breaking the complexity.
Yeah, that's how we break down the complexity of
Yeah.
putting the art into a space. Yeah.
As we talk about value engineering, parametrics, algorithm, everything. So, you being the professional, you know these terms. But when you deal with clients and audiences, how do they typically respond to this? Or maybe how do you make them understand? Or even if they understand or not?
Right. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, most of the times they don't understand. And see, the whole idea is that we try to simplify things as much as possible. We don't like to talk about the process too much with the clients. We like to talk about the value that they're getting. We like to talk about the impact that the piece might have in a particular space. And I think that drives the narrative for us. For example, if I'm creating a nice red piece of furniture, which is bold and red, parametrically designed, but I'm not going to talk about that it's parametrically designed. I'm going to talk about here's this red shiny piece which is going to make your space really pop up, rather than talking about the intricacy of the fabrication involved. That is something which we like to keep it very internal. Of course, it's a part of our journey, it's a part of our process, and as designers, we love to talk about it because imagine if an artist is giving you a piece of art and is talking about what kind of brushes he used to paint it and what kind of techniques he used to spray some and patterns on it. You may lose the interest. That's not the purpose of art. And in fact, I think there's a very popular quote about art is that art makes the comfortable, uh, puts them into a discomforted space, and and gives comfort to the discomforted.
Yeah.
And I don't know the exact quote, but it pretty much means that. And that's exactly what the art is supposed to be doing, because it is supposed to move minds, it is supposed to move emotions, it is supposed to transform a space.
Right.
So all our art installations that we are doing are, we like to call them as really transformative, because it can really transform the way the space is being perceived and seen. And being architects as well and trying to create art, we are able to understand how architecturally a space performs, and how what is the meaning of the space, and we try to inculcate all of that into the process in itself.
Right. And I mean, parametric facades are being talked about a lot recently in India. They were not earlier, but now they are. And what's your take on parametric art precisely, maybe being mainstream in public spaces or galleries? Or are people talking about it? Or will it be at some point be mainstream in India?
It's a very interesting question, because when we started doing facades, which is almost like 10 years back, nobody knew the term of parametric facade. Not many people knew the term parametric, and I think we were the sort of the first one to popularize the term through our education initiatives that we were doing. And now that where we are sitting right now, I mean, people understand the term parametric, although they don't understand it in the right manner. They have a different perception about parametric. People think that anything which is complex looking, anything which is curvilinear fluid is parametric. Parametric is basically a process of designing through in a mathematical manner, through writing a few algorithms to design something. And if I talk about parametric art, yes, uh, hashtag parametric facade is much more popular right now than hashtag parametric
Exactly,
art.
that's
We
what.
love to use that in a lot of our projects, but honestly, it is not as popular right now. But I've had interactions recently with a few gallerists, with a few curators of art. They have started to identify the term parametric. Although they have a notion because they know there are few artists who work in the parametric space, and we try to tell them about and talk to them about that this is not only this is not parametric. Parametric can be a lot of things. How even if you produce a simple art piece, for example, even this table, that has a certain kind of a pattern which is more fluidic, and this is a pattern which is developed parametrically. But do I need the technique of parametric design to create that pattern? No. If Did I sketch out this pattern? Yes, because when I was designing this, I did not use parametric techniques. I was merely sketching it. I use parametric as a tool, as a medium to help me create the drawings, the 3D model, the fabrication data, which is where parametric design's role was. So, are we ready to talk about the process of how art is created? I think no. And the moment we start to do that and put a lot of emphasis that this art is parametric, we lose the sense of it being an art.
Right.
It starts to become an object or a product rather.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that art is not a product. It is something, it is an emotion. It is supposed to sort of, like I said earlier, move people, move spaces, and move emotions totally.
Right. I mean, that's a nice take on the perspective, I would say.
So, as a part of the Breaking Complexity podcast, we're also looking back into the archives where I had the opportunity to have conversations with Laura Narvaez from Fosters and Partners, and I had the opportunity to have a candid conversation with her at the Fosters and Partners office in London. And this was a very insightful conversation. So, sharing a bit of snippet from that would be adding a lot of value to this episode. Talking of computation in general, like how much of computational design do you actually apply in the practice, and in what ways do you apply computation? I know you have an expertise in spatial analysis. So how do you approach that? How do you end up using that in any project? What is the general workflow?
Well, in my case, or in our case, in the urban design group,
Right.
we use heavily GIS
Mhm.
software, that's
Right.
geographical information systems. We use open source data
Mhm.
information like
Right.
OpenStreetMap or any other kind of source that we
Yeah.
use. Nowadays, there's a lot of open access information. Um, even from Twitter media to understand certain social patterns, if you wish.
Right.
So the way we use it, it's in order to understand, you know, the world, the built environment in its physical way. But
Mhm.
we usually combine that also to the social perspective of the
Right.
physical environment.
Right.
And I think that's the very powerful tool of the GIS or the
Right.
analytical process of
Yeah.
space.
Right.
And the analytical process of architecture itself.
Right.
In our team, and I think it's important to highlight, in our team, there are different people with different expertise.
Mhm.
So we're not only urban designers in spatial analysis, it's also very much design based.
Mhm.
There's also parametric designs.
Right.
That is more in the world of
Yeah.
computational
Yeah.
design. There's also landscape architects doing
Right.
that part of the process. There's anthropologists and there's urban planners
Right.
and transport planners as well,
Right.
with a strong background in engineering.
Right.
So putting those things together,
It's all a collaborative.
it's a
effort.
collaborative work that we
Right.
do. And I think putting that together, it's what really makes the process work.
I mean, I'm just curious, as you mentioned that you produced this table parametrically. So, I mean, there are a lot of furniture stores outside, and this precisely is a piece of furniture only. How would you define this as an art, not a furniture piece?
Right. So I think there's a very thin line between art and object, and for me, this piece of furniture is less of a furniture and more of an art, actually.
Okay.
I mean, it might be because of the process that we followed and the intention with which this was produced. Uh, the idea behind producing this table was to create art and make it functional. Hence, it became a furniture. Rather than the other way around, that you want to create a furniture and create a pattern on it, and then you make it into an artistic furniture. So both the things, we're producing the same thing, but the process is going to be absolutely different. So when we are creating art as a furniture, we're always thinking of the impact first, and then slowly comes the practicality aspect. And I can give you a very interesting example in this, that when we produce this pattern, it was very interesting. I mean, you can actually move your hand on this and feel the kind of curves that it has. And
Yeah.
yeah, but to make it functional, we had to put a glass on top, or we were also thinking of doing a resin on top and having a completely resin layer, but we wanted to take this glass off, uh, just to understand the texture and the materiality. But then this does not remain as a functional product if you remove the glass. So that's what we have to always think, that when we are trying to create an artistic product which has to be functional, we have to think of it as an artistic object first, and then the function behind it. Similarly, in a lot of situations, we try to create these artistic patterns on a wall art. We thought of not cladding it with a glass or something and not protecting that particular finish, because we wanted people to have the tactile effect of actually touching it, basically. So I think depending on where we have to use art and in what mediums, we usually decide. And there are a lot of times when we do a lot of parametric benches, furniture pieces, which are all these sectioned kind of elements that we have. I mean, I'm sort of bored of parametric sectioning, but that's something of, we do quite a lot as well, because that is something which has been very popular now, and a lot of people can actually do it. It's pretty straightforward now. But we've ended up experimenting a lot when we do parametric sectioning also, because we try to introduce different kind of cuts and seams and play a lot with the geometries. I remember recently we did a huge 25 feet tall wall installation for one of the luxury bathroom fitting brands in Hyderabad, for one of their experience centers. And there we actually used rubber wood board, because that was again the part of the palette. And we had to introduce these seams and cuts to draw a narrative towards it being an artistic piece. And all of those cuts and seams which we had to introduce, that is a part of the artistic gesture. And then to make it functional, we have to look into the functional aspect of whether the structural stability is there, which is exactly where the value engineering and its role starts to come into the picture as well. We had to 3D print a lot of prototypes before we actually went on to 1:1 scale. We had to do a lot of testing on different scales, the joinery details, etc., before we could actually make the final piece. So it's a back and forth for us, but long story short, when we have to create a functional art, it is art first, functional second. That's
I mean, even if it's art first, then also a lot of factors come into consideration, a lot, I would
Yeah.
say. So, I mean, yeah, that's why you professionals are here to create the art that we would like.
Yeah, and we love creating this, and it's so exciting that we are able to work with different kind of materials, different kind of geometries and forms. And honestly, like the projects that we are working with, every time there's a new challenge. Sometimes we're introducing a new material to the palette. Uh, we're starting to work on stainless steel as well, and doing a few sculptures and a few installations for stainless steel. Uh, we're working a bit with brass in different forms now. We're trying to work with the hammering effect on the brass, sheet to create a different kind of an artistic form. And we're also trying to explore some contextual and local arts as well. So there are a few projects where we're actually exploring, contextual local artists and trying to get them on board onto some of the arts that we are working with, and bring in that local touch into the art that we are developing. So yeah, all excited about what we're producing.
Yeah. I mean, art is something that you don't usually connect with commercial or a corporate industry sort of a thing. So I just want to understand, like, can we fit in art at a corporate industry also, or only it's just restricted to the residential sector only?
I mean, on the contrary, we're doing most of the artistic works and the commissioned work that we are doing uh, for commercial projects actually. Yeah, and it's not only residential. In fact, residential is usually a little less and few things here and there, and usually smaller pieces and installations. But when it comes to commercial spaces, there are lobbies. Then we're doing with hospitality sector as well. And the commercial spaces are also have different ways of lighting, different ways of iconic furniture that they want to have. So a lot of brands are also becoming very interested in art as a part of their workspaces and their culture, because people have become much more educated about art, I feel, in the last couple of years. So it has become popular. It is no more boring desks and chairs put together to make an office space. Any kind of corporate sales space that we're working with has an art in different forms. So not just in interiors but also in exteriors. Like the entrance spaces has a sculpture, for example. So we are working with a few commercial brands which are having these sculptures in the lobby areas, which we are trying to create in different materials like metal uh, and stone. So apart from that, if I think of other typologies, we're also working with airports as well. So we've done one large installation in Bangalore airport, which was a collaboration with an artist in Bangalore who was actually commissioned the works, but we were brought in as parametric experts to rationalize that art and do the value engineering. And we were so super excited because that was going to be a part of the new terminal at the Bangalore airport. So, and it came out fantastic. It's like a 25 feet long or a 30 feet long red color stacking red color petals of flower, which was made in stainless steel. And then we're also doing this butterfly installation, which takes the flight uh, because it represents the flight taken at an airport. And this is something which we're doing in an airport in South India. And we're in discussion with a lot of other, aviation spaces and airports as well. We've also done for the aviation sector, if I talk about, we also did this corporate space for one of the CEOs for an aviation company for private jets. And we did a few art installation pieces in that space which represent the airplanes and the aerospace industry. So I think it is not restricted to residential only. It is to do with a lot of different spaces. Even in retail, there's a lot of demand right now in retail industry as well, because retail has usually a centerpiece. If you look at the high-end brands, their retail is very specific and artistic. You look at the Regent Street and the Oxford Street in London, for example, the kind of installations that they have on the window is kind of unique in itself. So usually a good artist is commissioned just to make the window of the retail, you know so and the cost of that artwork is typically more than the cost of the overall interior space as well at times. So it totally depends on different kinds of sector that you're working with. But I feel that no matter what the industry is, art will always remain art, and it will remain timeless. That is what it is supposed to do in that space.
I mean, that was a very, very insightful conversation that we had today. I mean, I wish we could have a little more, because this topic is very unexplored right now. I mean, not even artists themselves have this much deep understanding of what exactly art is, how vast is it, in that sense. And if you guys also want to look for such unique ideas, art installations, do follow Art Lab. So that's it for today and this particular episode, and I hope you enjoyed.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was a lovely conversation. I love to talk about art. I love to talk about geometry, pattern, algorithms, complexity, and love to break it down. And I think exciting to have this conversation specific to art. And yeah, looking forward to quite a few more conversations.
Yeah. Follow Breaking Complexity podcast for more such conversations.
That's it for the episode of Flirting with Design Technologies. Season 0 has been about pushing creative limits, questioning technology's role in design, and embracing the complexity behind innovation. But we're just getting started. Season 1, Don't Play With My Curves, is coming soon, where we take complexity to a whole new level. Stay tuned and follow Breaking Complexity podcast and subscribe us on all the platforms. We'll see you in the next episode.